Maria Santos always sat in the last row of the community music classroom. She arrived early every week, long before the main hallway filled with voices, and always took the same seat near the wall. She placed her notebook carefully on the desk, straightened its edges, and waited quietly. Many people never noticed her arrival because she moved with such silent presence. To others she seemed ordinary, someone who simply wanted to learn something new at her age. The music class was held inside a small building that used to be a youth center. The walls had been painted white several years earlier, and most of the paint had faded unevenly, leaving light patches here and there. The pianos in the room were older models, slightly chipped along the edges, but still functional. A faint smell of wood polish always floated in the space. Students who joined the class were mostly teenagers or young adults who wanted to improve their skills. Maria, being older than everyone, blended into the background. She never spoke unless asked something directly. Even then, she only answered with short, gentle replies. Her voice was calm and polite, but as weeks passed, some teachers assumed she struggled or could not keep up. She wrote in her notebook slowly, carefully, repeating instructions word for word so she would not forget anything. Some students thought she was moving slowly because she did not understand, but the truth was she never rushed through anything in life. On most days, the teacher would ask for a volunteer to come to the front and play a few simple notes. Everyone hesitated at first, except a few confident students who liked to show what they knew. Maria never raised her hand. When the teacher looked around the room and asked for another volunteer, Maria lowered her eyes and fixed them on her notebook. She had no desire to stand in front of anyone. She had come to learn quietly, not to be seen. The class teacher, Mr. Harrington, was not unkind, but he was impatient. He had spent years teaching music and believed that the fastest way to improve was by practicing openly and showing progress. When someone avoided playing, he assumed it was due to lack of effort rather than personal reasons. Every time Maria stayed seated, he sighed loudly. He tapped his pen against the music stand, as if trying to hold in frustration after the fourth week. Some students began whispering about her. A boy sitting near the window leaned toward his friend and said, "She never even touches the piano. Why is she here?" His friend shrugged and laughed softly. Maria heard them, but she did not react. She simply turned to a new page in her notebook and continued writing. She preferred quiet places, quiet voices, and quiet experiences. Loud attention had never felt comfortable. Many years earlier, she had lived a life filled with noise, stages, bright lights, rehearsals, but now she chose peace. She never told the class why. She never intended to. During break time, most students gathered near the hallway where a vending machine hummed behind the wall. They talked about songs they liked, musicians they admired, and instruments they wanted to buy someday. Maria often stayed inside the classroom. She looked through sheet music pages slowly, almost lovingly. Sometimes she touched the piano keys lightly, but only when no one was near. One afternoon, while she was alone for a moment, she pressed down a single key, a gentle note. Then she pressed another. She paused, closed her eyes, and gently played a short phrase. Her fingers moved across the keys like they had once done, effortlessly. The melody was soft and short, like someone whispering a memory. When she heard footsteps outside, she immediately lifted her hands and moved away from the instrument. No one knew her connection to the piano. No one guessed that she had once played pieces far beyond anything taught in beginner classes. To everyone in the room, she looked like someone trying to learn from the start. Mr. Harrington noticed her silence more each week. He believed her lack of participation was a refusal to grow. When she avoided playing again, he said something in front of everyone. "Learning music requires courage. You cannot learn quietly forever. You need to play in front of others. Otherwise, you're not learning." Maria simply nodded with a gentle smile. Though she did not agree fully, she did not want attention, and she was not afraid of practice. She just preferred to stay private. Sometimes, after class ended, she walked to a small cafe 2 blocks away. She always ordered the same drink, warm tea, and sat near the window. She watched people pass by without speaking to anyone. She liked being around life, but not in the center of it. Days passed, and her teacher grew more impatient. He believed she was holding the class back, even though she never asked for extra help. He believed she was careless, though she studied more carefully than most students. He misunderstood the quietness and misread her silence. Maria, however, did not hold any negative feelings toward him. She understood that teachers often carried pressure, expectations, and invisible worries. She respected that. Inside her notebook, she wrote small reminders for herself, not just about music, but about life. Be gentle with others, stay calm even when misunderstood. Some truths do not need to be spoken. She lived by these ideas. One evening, as she walked to the bus stop after class, she heard music from a nearby building. Someone was practicing a loud, energetic song on a violin. The sound echoed through the street, reminding her of something distant, someone she once knew, someone whose talent shaped her life. She paused, listened for a moment, and then walked away. She did not cry. She simply breathed slowly. Maria was not a person without past. She was a woman carrying a history she chose not to speak of, one filled with stages, travel, and heartbreak. But to this new class, she was just a quiet student who never raised her hand. And because of that silence, people formed the wrong idea. They believed she lacked skill. They believed she lacked confidence. They believed she was struggling. Not one person imagined the truth. For now, she allowed it. Letting others misjudge her was easier than explaining everything. She believed time would reveal what needed to be seen. Even without her speaking, she continued showing up, early as always, notebook open, eyes lowered, waiting for instruction. And though no one knew it, something was slowly waking inside her, not through pressure, not through judgment, but through the gentle closeness she felt each time she sat beside a piano. A part of her she thought she had buried was now quietly asking to return, though she did not yet understand how, when, or why. She only knew that each class brought her a little closer to something she once loved deeply. And soon, without planning it, others would see the truth she had kept hidden for years. The next week began much like the others. Maria arrived early, sat in her usual place, and opened her notebook. But even before class started, something felt different. The air in the room seemed tense. A few students whispered while glancing at her, though she pretended not to notice. She kept her eyes on her notes and waited quietly. The teacher, Mr. Harrington, walked in with a stack of printed papers. He placed them on the desk and cleared his throat. His voice carried more firmness than usual. Everyone will be assigned a piece to practice, he announced. You must learn it and perform it in 2 weeks. A soft wave of murmuring spread through the class. Some students seemed excited, others seemed nervous. But Maria remained calm because she expected to receive something simple. She assumed he would give her a beginner piece, maybe something with slow tempo and few chords. She never imagined anything else. The teacher began calling names one by one, handing out pages of music. Each student walked up, took their sheet, and returned to their seat. Some giggled nervously. Some whispered about how difficult it looked. Then he called Maria's name. She stood and walked toward him with her usual calm presence. He looked at her for a moment before handing her a piece of paper. She returned to her desk, thanking him softly. When she sat down and looked at the page, her heart paused for a moment. It was one of the most demanding pieces in classical piano music. Long, fast runs, heavy chords, complex rhythms, shifting keys. Every part of it required strength, skill, and absolute precision. The room felt still. Even students near her noticed the title on her sheet and widened their eyes. Why did she get that? Someone whispered. Maria did not lift her head. She simply studied the page quietly. Her eyes followed every symbol, every mark, every difficult cluster of notes. Her chest tightened slightly, not from fear, but from the old memories that came with the music. Mr. Harrington looked at her and spoke firmly. You need something that will challenge you, he said. You have spent weeks avoiding participation, so now you will show progress. Maria nodded once. Though she did not explain anything, she understood that the teacher had misread her silence. She knew he thought she lacked ability or seriousness. She could have corrected that misunderstanding easily, but she chose not to. It had been years since she touched such difficult music. Years since she allowed herself to play something that carried real depth. Years since her fingers moved through fast passages without hesitation. She knew she could play it. She also knew she had tried hard to avoid showing that part of herself. But life sometimes brings back what a person tries to hide. A girl sitting behind her leaned forward and asked quietly, "Do you know how to read that? It looks impossible." Maria smiled gently and said, "I will learn." The girl nodded with sympathy, assuming Maria would struggle. Everyone assumed that. No one could imagine the truth. Class continued, and students began practicing their assigned music. Some played slowly, some stumbled, some laughed at their mistakes. Keys clicked, pages rustled, pencils tapped lightly. Maria looked at her page, not touching the piano yet. She traced along the notes with her fingertip. She remembered how her mentor once explained this very piece to her long ago. His voice echoed in her memory, soft and patient. She closed her eyes briefly. Then she placed her hands on the piano. At first she pressed simple notes, single ones, spaced apart. She tested the keys lightly like someone greeting an old friend. The sound came through clean and warm. Her right hand moved slowly, then her left. Nothing complicated yet, but even with that small motion, the teacher noticed. "You should begin," he said from across the room. Maria did not answer. She simply bowed her head slightly and continued practicing, though quietly enough that no one could measure her skill. Students around her tried their own pieces, stopping often to try again. Mr. Harrington walked around the room correcting posture, explaining timing, adjusting finger positions. When he reached Maria's piano, he paused. She was only touching small fragments of the piece, almost deliberately slow. "That piece will require daily practice," he said, believing she was looking at it for the first time. "Yes," she replied gently, "and it would be wise to ask for help." Maria looked up briefly and said, "I will do my best." He nodded and walked away, thinking she needed special attention. When class ended, others gathered in small groups discussing how unfair the assignments were. Some complained, some encouraged each other. One student said, "I don't know how she's going to survive that piece. Even advanced players struggle with it." Someone else responded, "Maybe the teacher is trying to push her harder." Maria walked past them without reacting. She folded her sheet carefully, placed it inside her notebook, and exited the room. She did not rush home. Instead, she walked to her usual cafe, ordered her tea, and sat by the window as she always did. She took out the sheet again, smoothed the top edge gently, and studied it. Not as a challenge, but as a memory. The tea steam rose softly into the air. Outside, cars passed, conversations floated through the room, spoons tapped cups. But Maria was somewhere far away inside her thoughts. That piece was not only difficult, it once held meaning. Someone had taught it to her long ago with patience and pride. Someone who used to play music beside her. Someone whose absence changed the course of her life. She remembered a moment on a stage many years earlier, a spotlight, a silent audience, her hands opening the piece with strength she did not have anymore. The applause, the praise, the long nights of practice. She whispered quietly to herself, "I guess things return when they should." She closed the page and finished her tea. The next day, at home, she pulled out an old piano cover from a closet. Beneath it was a keyboard she had not touched in years. The keys were dusty, and one pedal squeaked faintly when pressed. She cleaned the surface slowly, then sat down, letting her fingers rest on the keys. She began softly, not the full piece, not loudly, just sections, small phrases, short bursts of memory. Her left hand moved with familiarity. Her right hand followed like a shadow. She could still play it. Her technique had weakened slightly, but her memory was alive. Hours passed without her noticing. She paused occasionally, not because she was tired, but because playing awakened feelings. Music can do that. It does not simply sound, it stirs, it reminds, it reveals. She felt the ache inside, but she also felt warmth. When the week continued, class sessions seemed different. Students talked less, practiced more. Everyone had something to prepare. When Maria entered the room again, eyes shifted toward her. Though no one spoke directly, one student whispered, "She's going to crash at the recital." Poor woman. Maria heard it, but did not let it settle inside her. She played quietly again, hiding her skill, sounding like a beginner. She chose to do that. She believed she could not reveal everything, yet not because she lacked ability, but because revealing truth too early changes how people behave. And she did not want pity or admiration. She wanted space. She wanted to work through this alone. Mr. Harrington continued believing she needed pressure to improve. He watched her and felt impatience growing. He assumed she moved slowly because she was scared. He assumed giving her a difficult piece would force her to break through something. But Maria had already broken through something, not through force, but through quiet acceptance. By the end of the week, she could already play sections clearly. At home, she practiced more, though she never played loudly. The neighbors never heard her. It was a private space, a private journey. She was not preparing to impress anyone. She was preparing to face something she walked away from long ago. And though no one around her understood it yet, the decision to play that assignment would become the turning point. Not for the class, not for the teacher, but for herself. The classroom was unusually quiet the following week. Students took their seats, warmed up their fingers, and prepared for another day of practice. But even before the teacher arrived, everyone whispered about the upcoming evaluation. They wondered who would do well, who would stumble, and who would surprise everyone. Maria heard the voices around her, but she sat calmly, notebook open, eyes lowered. When Mr. Harrington finally entered the room, he carried a clipboard. The sound of the door closing made everyone straighten up. He did not greet them as usual. Instead, he walked directly to the center of the room. "Today, I will observe your progress," he announced. "Each of you will play a small section of the piece you were assigned." Students exchanged nervous glances. Some looked down at their sheets. Others stretched their fingers, preparing to play. Maria remained quiet. The teacher called names randomly. One by one, students walked to the piano and played their parts. Some played with confidence, some hesitated, some made mistakes. The teacher corrected them gently, but his tone held expectation. Then came Maria's turn. "Your turn," Mr. Harrington said. Maria stood slowly and walked toward the piano. The room became still. Many eyes followed her. People leaned slightly forward without even realizing it. She sat down. She placed her hands on the keys, not fully, just gently resting. She breathed. Then she began. At first, her fingers moved slowly. She played only the opening notes, nothing fast, nothing dramatic. But even that simple start carried weight. Her tone was balanced and even. Her left hand supported her right hand beautifully. There was control, clarity, no hesitation. But she stopped after just a few seconds. That was all she played. Harrington frowned. "Continue," he instructed. Maria looked up gently. "I will play more during the recital," she said softly. "You need to give more than that," he replied, sounding slightly irritated. She looked back at the keys and played only 2 more short lines, still flawless. Still steady, yet she stopped again before the music reached its most difficult passages. She stood and walked back to her seat. The teacher shook his head. "You need to challenge yourself, or you will not improve." Some students whispered again. Some felt sorry for her. Others expected her to fail later. No one understood her choice. But Maria was not hiding because she feared judgment. She was hiding because she was not ready to reveal what she truly carried. After class, a younger student approached her. "You play well," she said. "Why don't you play more?" Maria smiled kindly. "Sometimes it takes time to show everything." Then she left later that evening. She returned home and sat at her old keyboard. She turned on a small table lamp beside it, giving the room a warm glow. The music sheet lay open, marked with small pencil notes she added. She placed her fingers gently on the keys and began playing, not the slower version she showed in class, but the real version. Her hands moved quickly and effortlessly. The difficult passages no longer felt difficult. Her memory guided her. Her emotion carried her. Her timing and control returned fully, as if she had never stepped away from music. But something happened. Halfway through the piece, she stopped suddenly, not because of a mistake but because her throat tightened. She closed her eyes and took a slow breath. Memories arrived. The sound of violin practice in another room. Laughter. Warm applause. Long rehearsals. A voice saying, "You play beautifully. Don't ever stop." She rested her hands on her lap, breathing deeply. Pain does not disappear just because time passes. It softens, but it stays. Maria wiped her face gently, then smiled, not a happy smile, but one filled with acceptance. She resumed playing. When she finished, she whispered quietly, "I will honor it this time." 2 days later, the class met again. This time, they practiced longer than usual. The recital was only a few days away. Students grew anxious. Some begged for extra guidance. Some asked classmates for help, but Maria practiced quietly, choosing spots on the piano where no one noticed her real ability. Mr. Harrington grew more confused. He could not understand someone who progressed without showing it. He believed she lacked confidence. He believed she was afraid. But he did not know that she was waiting for the right moment, the moment when showing truth would matter. After class, he asked her to stay. When they were alone, he said, "I want to help you, but you need to try. You rarely play in front of anyone." Maria listened politely. "I am trying," she replied. He shook his head. "Not enough." She looked at him gently and said, "Sometimes progress cannot be seen immediately. Sometimes it happens quietly." He sighed, not satisfied. "You will have to perform soon," he reminded her. "I know," she replied softly. "Are you nervous?" "No," she answered. "Then why are you holding back?" Maria lowered her eyes for a moment. Then she said quietly, "Because when I play fully, I remember things I am still learning to accept." The teacher stood silent, not knowing what she meant. He nodded reluctantly and dismissed her. That evening, Maria walked to her cafe again. She carried her notebook, not the sheet music. She opened it and wrote something new. Some moments return when we are ready, not when others ask. She closed the notebook and stared out at the street. People walked, traffic lights changed, buses passed, children laughed. Life moved forward around her. She thought deeply about the recital, not because she wanted applause, not because she wanted to prove anything, but because performing meant reopening a door she once closed. She was not hiding skill. She was protecting something fragile. But a part of her felt lighter now. At home later that night, she practiced again, not to perfect the music because she already could, but to strengthen herself emotionally. When her final note faded into silence, she kept her hands on the keys, not moving, not rushing. She knew she was ready. The next morning, she walked into class and sat in her usual seat. Students practiced intensely now, competing silently with one another. Some tried to outshine others. Maria simply smiled. Her heart was steady. Her confidence had returned, not the loud confidence full of announcements, but the quiet kind that sits peacefully inside. She looked at her music once again and whispered in her mind, "I will play it completely when the time comes," and that time was almost here. Soon, she would sit at the piano, not as a hidden beginner, not as someone avoiding attention, but as someone reclaiming herself. No one expected what would happen during the recital, but Maria knew, and that was enough. The day of the rehearsal arrived. Maria walked into the classroom earlier than usual. The sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows on the old wooden floor. The air smelled faintly of polish and dust, the usual combination that had become comforting to her over the weeks. Students were already in the room, warming up their instruments, their voices low but nervous. Mr. Harrington arrived with a few extra sheets of music, and his eyes scanned the room. He noticed Maria sitting calmly, notebook and music sheets in front of her, eyes lowered. He frowned, unsure what to make of her quiet demeanor. He began the rehearsal, asking each student to play a small section. Some played confidently, some stumbled, some struggled. The teacher moved around, offering guidance, correcting mistakes, praising where he felt it was deserved. When it was Maria's turn, she approached the piano. A hush seemed to fall over the room. Everyone expected her to struggle or hesitate, as she had always done. But this time, Maria did not pause. She sat, straightened her back, and placed her hands on the keys. Her first notes were soft, careful, almost tentative, but perfect in every way. She played slowly at first, letting each tone resonate in the room. The sound was clean, balanced, and carried a quiet authority. The students watched in silence, not fully understanding the depth of what they were hearing. Then, without a hint of hesitation, she began the more complex sections. Her fingers moved gracefully, navigating the difficult passages with speed and precision. She never stumbled. Her timing was exact, her dynamics expressive. Every note seemed alive, carrying emotion that filled the room. Some students leaned forward, stunned. They had never imagined someone so quiet could play with such power and depth. Mr. Harrington stopped in his tracks. He had expected a beginner, someone to struggle, someone to falter. But this was far beyond what he had anticipated. His jaw tightened as he watched her fingers move effortlessly across the keys. It was as if she was speaking directly through the music, telling a story that words could not capture. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment. No one spoke. No one moved. The notes lingered in the air, echoing softly against the walls. Then, slowly, Mr. Harrington clapped. It was a quiet, hesitant clap at first, then more confident as the realization hit him. The other students joined in, their applause tentative, unsure how to react, but growing louder as they absorbed the truth. Maria stood, bowed lightly, and returned to her seat. She did not smile broadly, nor did she seek attention. She simply exhaled softly, feeling a weight lift from her chest. She had performed, not for approval, not for recognition, but for herself. After class, some students approached her, asking questions, wanting advice. Maria listened patiently, giving tips on technique, posture, and practice. She did not boast, did not make herself the center of attention, but shared her knowledge gently, sincerely. Mr. Harrington stayed behind, watching her quietly. When the classroom emptied, he approached her. I underestimated you," he said softly. His voice carried a mix of regret and awe. "I thought you were struggling, holding back, not trying. I never realized." He paused, searching for words. "I never realized how much skill you have." Maria looked at him gently. "It's all right. You didn't know my story. You only saw what I chose to show." He nodded, still processing the moment. "You've taught me something important today. Talent isn't always loud. Skill isn't always visible. Sometimes the quietest people have the deepest strength." Maria smiled faintly, feeling the truth of his words. She did not need to explain everything. She did not need to reveal her past. She simply needed to play, to let the music speak. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the class changed. Students no longer whispered about her abilities or doubted her commitment. They approached her with respect, listening to her advice, watching her practice quietly. She became a source of inspiration, not because she sought attention, but because her talent and dedication could not be ignored. Maria continued practicing diligently. She refined the piece, paying attention to every note, every phrasing, every dynamic. Each day, she felt more connected to the music and to herself. She was rediscovering something she had set aside years ago, something that had been dormant, waiting for the right moment. Her home practice sessions were quiet and deliberate. She spent hours with the piano, letting her hands move naturally, letting the music guide her. Sometimes tears would fall. Sometimes she would laugh quietly to herself. It was a journey of healing, of reclaiming the part of herself that she had once abandoned. On the evening before the recital, Maria sat in her room, looking at the sheet music one last time. She touched the keys lightly, remembering each phrase, each emotion tied to it. She did not need to perform for anyone. She needed to honor the music, honor the past, and honor herself. That night, she wrote a few lines in her notebook. Sometimes people cannot see what is hidden. Sometimes talent waits patiently. And sometimes, when the time is right, it speaks for itself. The recital hall was small but filled with anticipation. The next day, families, friends, and students from other classes gathered. The lights were warm, casting a gentle glow on the polished piano. Maria sat in the wings, quietly preparing herself. She did not feel fear, only a deep, steady calm. When her name was called, she walked to the piano. The audience watched, expecting an ordinary performance. Maria sat, placed her hands on the keys, and breathed deeply. Then she began. The notes flowed effortlessly. The difficult passages were executed with precision and grace. The audience could feel the emotion in every movement of her hands, every rise and fall of the music. The piece was not just played, it was lived. Her journey, her memories, her pain, her joy, all of it poured into the performance. By the time she finished, the hall was silent for a moment. Then applause erupted, growing louder, more heartfelt. People rose to their feet, clapping, some with tears in their eyes. Maria stood, bowed lightly, and returned to her seat. She did not smile widely or seek attention. She simply exhaled, feeling the release of years of quiet, of hidden skill, of patience. Mr. Harrington approached her afterward, tears in his eyes. "I am sorry for doubting you," he said. "You have shown all of us what it means to be truly talented. Quiet, humble, yet extraordinary." Maria nodded. "Thank you. I didn't play for approval. I played for myself, and for the music." Her students surrounded her, asking questions, wanting to learn. Maria guided them, showing them gently, patiently, without ever claiming to be above them. She had returned not just to music, but to sharing it, to inspiring others quietly, sincerely. The recital ended, but the impact of her performance remained. People would talk about it for weeks. Some would remember the technical perfection, some the emotion, some the humility. But for Maria, it was never about recognition. It was about reclaiming herself, about honoring her past, and about finally being at peace with the music she loved. She walked home that evening with a light heart. The streets were quiet, the air crisp. She smiled softly to herself, knowing that she had returned to something she had almost lost. Music had found its way back to her, and she had found her way back to it. The morning of the recital arrived, filled with a quiet energy. Maria woke early, the sunlight spilling gently across her room. She made herself a cup of tea and sat by the window, letting the warmth seep into her hands. Outside, the city moved in its usual rhythm. People hurrying to work, children walking to school, buses passing down the street. But Maria's world was still. Inside, she felt steady, calm, and ready. She dressed simply, in clothes that allowed her to move freely. There was no need for embellishments or showy attire. Today, the performance would speak louder than anything else could. She carried her sheet music carefully, tucked into her notebook, and left for the recital hall with deliberate steps. Each movement felt measured, like a rhythm she had known all her life. The hall was small but welcoming. Light streamed through high windows, bouncing off the polished wooden floor. Chairs were arranged in neat rows, and the piano sat in the center of the stage, waiting. Families and friends of students filled the seats, their chatter soft and expectant. Students from other classes stood in the back, whispering and shifting nervously, waiting for their turn to play. Maria found her seat backstage and opened her notebook. She wrote a few lines, a gentle reminder to herself. Play for yourself. Play for the music. Let it be true. She closed it and took a deep breath, letting her hands rest lightly on her knees. She did not feel fear or anxiety. She only felt presence and clarity. When the first performers finished, applause filled the hall. Some played beautifully, some stumbled, but all gave their effort. Maria listened quietly, observing the energy in the room without comparing herself. She had spent weeks preparing, not for approval, but for reconnection with the music she loved. Finally, her name was called. The audience quieted, turning toward the stage. She walked forward with calm steps, placing her notebook gently on the piano stand. The instrument looked familiar and welcoming. She sat, straightened her back, and let her hands hover above the keys. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the weight of her journey and the lightness of her readiness. Then she began. At first, the notes were soft, delicate, and measured. The audience leaned forward, drawn in by the clarity and emotion in every tone. Maria's fingers moved gracefully, hitting each note with precision. The piece unfolded slowly, like a story being told in a quiet voice. But as she progressed, the complexity of the music revealed itself. Fast runs, shifting rhythms, heavy chords, all executed flawlessly, yet without a hint of strain. Every motion was confident, every sound intentional. The audience could feel it. They did not just hear the music, they experienced it. The notes carried emotion, memories, and presence. Some listeners closed their eyes, letting the music move through them. Some sat wide-eyed, amazed at the depth and control. And some, parents and teachers, watched with astonishment, realizing that the quiet woman who had always sat at the back had a gift that far exceeded expectation. Maria played the entire piece, not rushing, not hesitating. Her hands glided over the keys with a mixture of strength and elegance. Each note carried the years of practice, the moments of grief and joy, the quiet determination to return to music. She was not performing for applause. She was performing for herself, for the memory of the music that had once been her world, and for the joy of being able to create something timeless. When the last note resonated and faded into silence, the hall remained still for a heartbeat. Then, slowly, applause began. It grew, louder and more heartfelt, until the entire audience was clapping, some rising to their feet. A few whispered with awe, unable to fully express what they felt. Teachers and students alike looked on, recognizing not just skill, but soul in the performance. Maria stood, bowed lightly, and returned to her seat backstage. She did not smile broadly, did not seek attention. She simply exhaled, feeling a wave of peace. The weight of years of hiding her talent, the hesitation to return to music, and the quiet patience she had maintained, all of it lifted in that single performance. Afterwards, Mr. Harrington approached her, his eyes moist. He shook his head slowly. I never imagined. You are extraordinary. I am so sorry for misjudging you. You've shown us all that talent is not always visible, and that humility does not mean weakness. He paused, searching for the right words. Thank you for sharing your gift. Maria smiled faintly, her gaze calm. Thank you. I did not play for approval. I played for myself, and for the music. She meant every word. The music had returned to her life in a way that nothing else could. Other students surrounded her, asking questions, seeking advice, wanting to learn. Maria guided them gently, showing them techniques, ways to approach complex passages, and the importance of emotion in performance. She did not boast, she did not demand attention. She simply shared, quietly and sincerely, the knowledge she had gained over years of experience and recent rediscovery. The recital continued, but the impression Maria left on the audience lingered. People would talk about her performance for weeks, remembering the skill, the depth, the humility, and the sincerity. Some would focus on the technical perfection, others on the emotion, and others still on the quiet presence that had captivated them without effort. After the event, Maria walked home in the soft evening light. The streets were calm, the air cool and fresh. She carried no trophy, no certificate, no visible reward. What she carried was far more valuable: the connection to her passion, the reclaiming of a part of herself she thought was lost, and the understanding that talent, patience, and humility could create beauty in the world quietly, but profoundly. She passed familiar cafes, stores, and parks. The city moved around her, but she moved through it with a light heart. Music had found its way back to her, and she had found her way back to music. At home, she sat at her piano, resting her hands on the keys. She did not play immediately. She simply sat and let the silence fill the room. Then, softly, she began to play a simple melody, one she had once loved as a child. The notes were gentle, filled with warmth and calm. She closed her eyes and let herself be carried away. The performance at the recital had been a climax, a moment of recognition and personal triumph. But this quiet, solitary playing was the heart of her return. Music was no longer a stage, no longer a test, no longer a judgment. It was presence, joy, and connection. She played until the sun dipped below the horizon, and the room was bathed in the golden light of evening. The last notes lingered, soft and fading. She lifted her hands, breathed deeply, and smiled, not at anyone, but at herself. Maria had returned to music. She had faced the past, honored her talent, and embraced the quiet power she had carried all along. The world around her had seen a glimpse of it, but for her, the true reward was the journey, the rediscovery, and the peace that came with knowing that some truths, once hidden, are worth waiting for.